What is up everyone? Today we are taking a look at the Synology RackStation RS214. Now before we get started, this is an older model. This is the previous generation shallow depth 2-bay RackStation. The current model, which is the equivalent to this guy, is the RS217. It has some updated specs and some newer features. This is the previous generation, but it will be completely 100% ideal for my use case at the moment. So this is no longer sold brand new anymore, and of course I picked this up on eBay and I am pleased with what I paid for this guy. It was up for a buy it now. I made the seller an offer and the seller accepted, and it's here, it's working. I've tested it. What I did, I've had this guy in IMNC HQ for over a month. I've just had other projects going and I was waiting for the drives. So what I did was I recorded a little video when I first got this guy. I'm going to roll that video right now. I tested it straight away just to make sure it was all working when I received it. So the unit arrived in pretty okay-ish packaging. Not as much bubble wrap as I'd like, but what I did enjoy is the fact that they lined this Amazon box with loads of tape, because Amazon boxes on the second time round are a little bit on the thin side in my opinion for posting out stuff. But luckily this unit is not too heavy in comparison to my current Synology NAS, so I was delighted that it arrived in decent condition. A little bit dusty, I'll give it a wipe down. I've given it the first power on because it's an eBay purchase. I want to make sure that it's absolutely fine. I've gone straight on to find.synology.com, and along with Skaro, it's picked up this new RackStation. So I'm going to click connect and we're going to agree. There we go. No hard disk found on RS214. Please install hard drives before reconnecting. So it needs the drives, but as you can see, the NAS itself is up and running. It's at least giving us connectivity, and we're there within the setup of the OS. So next thing will be drives to get the machine fully up and running. So that clip was recorded about a month ago and I've had it sitting here ever since. I've been absolutely desperate to install this into the rack. I finally had time to do it today. So why have I purchased a second RackStation? This guy will act as the primary backup for my main NAS, which is Skaro, the NAS I installed probably about 2 years ago now. So that unit is a 4-bay RackStation, and this is a 2-bay. We're also going to be putting a lower capacity drives in this guy, so it's not going to be a one-to-one backup. It's not going to be a complete clone of the entire system. But what I will do is take the most crucial shares and automate a continuous backup to this machine. So all of that data that I feel that I couldn't live without if Skaro was to die, that's what will be backed up on this guy. In the future, this is a step in the right direction, but in the future I hope to get yet another solution, which may well be a third NAS or maybe an expansion unit to this guy or something. I haven't figured it out yet. I'm taking it one step at a time, guys. I would, in an ideal world, like to have enough space to completely back up every single piece of data from Skaro. Of course I'm running SHR on Skaro, so if I lose a drive I can replace that drive and I don't lose any data, but you know, the whole system can die during a rebuild or another drive can die during a rebuild. RAID isn't really a substitute for a real backup, obviously, so this is what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to get my backup solution finally on track, just in case I ever do get a big problem and I lose some data. That would not be very fun whatsoever. I do have a good few terabytes worth of drives outside of Skaro at the moment. I only have one external drive connected to the Mac Mini server currently, but I have some drives that aren't connected and they've got various copies of videos going way back. I've also got archive drives on my shelf. I've got 4 2-terabyte drives just sitting there, full of copies of old Final Cut libraries and video exports that I've taken over the years. So nearly everything on Skaro is backed up anyway, but what I don't have is an actively running backup that is constantly updating, and none of it is very organized. So this is what I'm hoping to address with this guy. It's a much better way of doing things, and I can't wait to get it installed and up and running. I'll feel a lot safer. So talking specifically about the RS214 for just a minute, like I said, it is the previous generation, so it's not quite as capable as the current RackStation offerings from Synology, but it is one of these gorgeous 12-inch deep units, so it's very, very shallow. It doesn't need rails. It's supported right from just the front rack ears. You can install it in very shallow racks, wall mount racks. It's a very versatile unit. It's even lighter than my other RackStation. They changed the body material. This body is black, whereas my 4-bay RackStation, the newer one, the RS816, That has a silver body. It's also a lot heavier. They changed quite a lot about the design. We'll have a look around the NAS in a second. Firstly, spec-wise, before I forget to mention, it's slightly less capable, but it'll be perfect for our needs in this task. The CPU is a little Marvell Armada 370, I believe, running at 1.2 gigahertz. And we also have half a gig of DDR3 RAM on board. Unlike your typical modern Synology NASs, this does not have expandable RAM. It also doesn't have an expansion slot or anything along those lines. What you see is what you get. It's not expandable, other than, of course, the drive bays and the option to install an expansion unit via the eSATA port. So that is a upgrade path for the future, but to be honest, I don't really see those expansion units coming up very often used. In fact, I've never seen one come up used, because if I had, I would have probably purchased one for Skaro. And they're very expensive to buy new. It's actually cheaper, ridiculously, it's cheaper to buy another NAS complete. So I doubt I'm ever going to end up with one of those expansion units, to be perfectly honest, but maybe I'll find a deal one day and I'll have that for a little bit of extra storage. Just having more bays that I can slot random drives into is something, but for now, this will be absolutely fine with its 2 bays. So before we take a look around the Synology NAS itself, I want to talk quickly about the drives I'm going to be popping into this guy, because this is where things get really special. I'd like to give a massive shout out to a viewer of mine named William. He sent me a message and offered me some spare drives that he had lying around in his garage. He didn't charge me for them at all. He didn't even charge me postage. He just gave them to me completely, no questions asked, cool as a cucumber, just gave me these drives. So William, thank you so much. Storage has always been a big problem for me. It's no secret on the channel that I've always struggled having enough storage, and this will be a colossal help. So thank you for everything you've done. I'm going to show you guys right now what William has given me. So we have one 6TB WD purple drive, and to complete the installation for this guy, we have two 6TB WD purple drives. So this will be a 12TB machine, but it gets even cooler because William had a third drive. So I don't have a plan for this drive yet, but I do know that I'll be using it actively somewhere. 6TB is a lot of space, so in total I received 18TB of storage from William, completely free of charge. William, you're a legend. Thank you so much. I've received so much support on the channel lately, guys. It's unreal. I just want to thank every single one of you. So before we proceed, I'm going to address the fact that these are WD purple drives. Those of you who know your WD colors will know that these are surveillance drives, and you can see down the bottom here that it even states surveillance drive. So these drives are optimized for CCTV installations. Give you guys a little bit of a better view of the drives there. There we go, that's a little bit nicer, isn't it? Playing dominoes with hard drives, always a bit scary, but looks good on camera. So typically for a system like this, you'd be looking at installing a NAS specific drive, something like the WD Red. In fact, I have WD Reds sitting in Skaro. They are advertised and sold as NAS drives. So what is the actual difference between a purple and a red? A purple is very similar to a red drive in lots of ways. Firstly, it has TLER, so it's suitable for use in a system that uses RAID, so they can work together quite happily. They also use WD's exact same 3D Active Balance Plus technology, which allows up to 8 of these drives to be used together in a single system without the concern of vibration damaging the drives, as long as you use no more than 8 together. Some of the slightly higher end WD drives of various colors can support more, but just like the Reds, you can use up to 8 of these guys in conjunction with each other. They can vibrate quite happily next to each other. So the difference between the WD purple and red is the purple runs a different firmware. It runs the all-frame technology firmware. The drive is rated for 24/7 video use, video being recorded to the drive. That's very important. In a CCTV application, that is the use case for these guys. Video is constantly being written. It's very rarely being read, but it's always being written 24 hours a day. And the all-frame technology firmware reduces error pixelation and reduces interruptions in the video. So while these drives aren't the #1 choice for a NAS, this is a backup system. So yes, they're surveillance drives, and I'm not using them for surveillance, but there's nothing really that wrong with installing them in a system like this. It's not their intended use, but they're still high-capacity hard drives, and they'll store my data. These are backup drives, so they'll only be turned to if something goes wrong with the primary system. The primary system has the appropriate WD REDs installed, but this is here as a safety net. So I hope that addresses some of the stuff with the WD purple. Yes, surveillance drives, I know they're surveillance drives, but they will be absolutely fine for this backup server. So, two of these guys working alongside each other for some lovely backups, and another 6 terabyte drive available for something else in the future. So let's have a little look around this guy. First of all, we've got the 2 hard drive bays, and the bays are pretty much exactly the same as what my current Synology NAS uses, so very familiar to me. What I did notice is the first bay is a little loose here. The front portion has kind of unclipped from the back, the metal piece, so it's a little loose there. I'll have a look at that before we put the drive in to see if I can clip that back a bit, sort of a bit more securely, but it's fine. It's just a little loose on the front here. Coming over, we've got 2 USB 2.0 ports, which is something that I don't have on my other NAS. Then we've got a power button, a row of LEDs for the status of various things, and we've got another button as well, which is the beep off button, I believe. Yes, we've got a tiny little, put a pin in there to turn off any warning beeps that this system might be making. Around the back of this guy, we've got a very basic selection of ports. We've got 2 gigabit Ethernet ports, so this guy does support link aggregation and failover. We've got 2 USB 3.0 ports, which is nice to see on the older model. It is a previous generation, but still, it was available in 2014, 2015 time, so not ancient by any means, and you still have USB 3.0, which is nice. eSATA for the expansion unit, or any external drive for that matter, I do believe. A console port, and an IEC power connector. Now, one thing you'll notice about the back of this unit is there are no fans, and this is something that's completely different between my current NAS and this slightly older one. It uses an entirely different cooling method. With the majority of rack mount servers and rack mount devices, you have fans on the back that draw in cool air from the front. They cool the components and exhaust that hot air out the back. That's how my current NAS works. With this one, it's got what I'm calling GameCube cooling. So there are 3 fans on the side, 3 vents on the other side. So this guy has a right to left cooling method, which is interesting and something that I wasn't expecting, but it won't make much of a difference at all. In fact, it may even help it ever so slightly, because the sides of my rack are quite generously sized. There's less cabling in the way, less obstruction for the fans, and there's direct cool air coming in from my intake fan at the bottom of the rack. So it should see pretty good cooling performance, even though it's got a completely different cooling system to the other components. Should be completely fine. So with it, I received a little bag with one of these keys in it. I already have some of these keys for my RS816. They are to lock the drive base, which is cool. I also received 4 drive screws, so we can put 2 screws in each drive. Unfortunately, didn't receive 8, but what can you do? And I got a standard IEC power cable with it. I also got an Ethernet cable with it, which was quite nice. It was a nice Cat5e black cable, so that's gone in my box of tricks. And what I've dug out for this installation is a nice short IEC jumper cable, because this NAS will be connected directly to the one remaining IEC output on my UPS. So just a C13 to C14 cable here, nice and short. But before we put it in the rack, I'm going to power it up outside of the rack, configure it all, so that it's ready by the time I put it in. That way, if there are any problems that arise, I don't need to pull the rack back out and remove the unit. So, first things first, let's install some hard drives. Let's take both of these caddies out, and off camera, I'm gonna have a quick look at why this is so loose. So there's no obvious reason why that's loose, but it's fine. It's probably just a broken plastic clip on the back of that, to be honest. Can't see any obvious ways of getting it clipped back in more securely, but it's not going to make any difference once it's installed. So a little bit dusty on these bays. We will give those a bit of a rub. Whoa, there's dust floating about everywhere here. So let's pop in some drives. Let's get 2 of our purple drives, and we'll put them in the caddies here. Oh yes, now we're talking. So 1, 2, and we'll flip them round. I have the screws, I have the screwdriver. This is going to be perfect. So there we have the drives screwed in to the 2 drive sleds. Now it's time to slide them into the front of the unit. Okay, so here we go with bay number 2 first. Followed by bay number 1. And we will indeed lock these drives because it's the coolest feature on these RackStations, I think. There we go, that one's locked, so you can't remove it. Bit loose there, but that's fine. And that one's locked. So you cannot get those drives out, which is cool. So if anybody breaks in, they can't steal your hard drives. They'd have to physically unscrew the entire unit and yank it out. Although with enough force, you could probably break these, but it's enough of a deterrent, I think. So what I'm going to do now, guys, is plug it into power and plug an Ethernet cable into it outside of the rack. So let's go for Ethernet and power. And there we have it. Plugged in, just those 2 connections, that's all we need. And let's fire it up. There we go. So let's wait for that to boot up and I'll jump over to my screen and we'll take a look at the configuration. So here we are, it found the RS214 straight away and all I did was type in find.synology.com and it comes up and finds it straight away. So here's the 214, we're going to go set up, install the latest DSM, of course, we want to do that. That's one thing, even though this is an older unit, this does support the latest version of DSM as well. That's something that I checked right away. All data will be removed on your hard disks. That is absolutely fine. We understand that. So installing Diskstation Manager. Now, one thing I will mention quickly, guys, is when I stopped filming with the camera and this guy was booting up, one of the drives, the one in bay 1, started making a strange noise. So instead of messing around, what I decided to do was swap it for the 3rd drive. So I installed that drive in the unit, powered it back up, and that is now silent, just like the one in bay 2. So we'll take a little look at the 3rd drive at the end of this video. We'll have a listen to the noise that it's making. We'll put it in a drive toaster and see exactly what's going on with it. So the update is finished. The RackStation is now rebooting and it should reconnect when it's finished rebooting. The power button over on the unit itself is blinking away to indicate that it's restarting. So that countdown process got down to about 5 minutes. And the LED stopped blinking on the front, and now we are here on the create an admin account screen. So that's perfect. Everything is going to plan at the moment. So the fans have certainly ramped up, and one of them sounds maybe like it's starting to go. There are 3 fans in it, so we'll have a listen to that in a minute. We'll also have a look at the fan settings when we get into DSM. But first of all, we have to set this stuff up. So for the name of this new server, we're going to be carrying on with the planet name theme, and we're going to also carry on with the Doctor Who theme that we started with Skaro. With this guy, we're going to go for Trenzalore. I just double checked the spelling of that planet just in case it is correct. Okay, I got a little nervous there. I thought it wasn't working, but it's just taking its sweet time. So we're going to set up a quick connect for this guy. I already have a Synology account, so we're going to use my existing Synology account that I'll log into right here. One of the fans is really bad in this NAS, really bad. So we're all set. We don't want to share that. And we should be up and running. So here we are at the desktop. Excellent. First thing I'm going to do before anything, guys, is go in and check this fan profile. So really sorry if you guys can hear that fan in the background. It's so bad. We will have to unplug it before we put it in the rack. But let's continue setting up the NAS. We won't let that slow us down. We'll tackle that in a minute. We'll see if we can find another fan for it. Let's go and set up our storage. So let's have a look and see if both of the drives are detected. Let's have a look. You can see, excellent. We have both drives installed, coming up as 5.5 terabytes, which is excellent. So that drive is healthy. So it's got 0 bad sectors, power on time of 14,000 hours. Oof, let's work that out in days. So this drive has been powered on for 603 days continuously.
And let's have a little look at the other one. Again, guys, these are backup drives, so it'll be absolutely fine. And this one again, 0 bad sectors, similar amount of power on time, 621 days on that guy, so that's excellent. Storage pool. Let's create our storage pool to begin with. So because this is a backup system, we don't care about performance with this system. It's just going to be for backup, so we want as much flexibility and as much storage as possible. Let's have a look at our options. So for this 2-bay system, we're going to create 2 storage pools. We're going to create a basic storage pool for each drive. We're not going to use any RAID in this system. There's no point, and it won't benefit us. It'll hinder us actually. If we use RAID 1, we'll only have half the capacity. We don't need redundancy because it's a backup server. If we use RAID 0, we'll have access to the full capacity and it'll be 1 pool, but there's no point to a performance gain because we don't need it to be quick, and we're just adding that extra layer of unreliability for no good reason. JBOD, similar reason, and SHR, I don't really see a benefit to using SHR in this instance. I believe if I create a Synology hybrid RAID pool with both drives enabled, it'll be similar to using RAID 1 in this case with a 2-bay system, because it'll give us 1 for redundancy, so we don't need it. We're just going to create 2 pools as basic pools, and that way it'll show up as 2 6TB drives. So pool 1 basic, next we'll only select 1 drive. Next, all the data on the drive will be erased. That's okay. Yes, we will perform the drive check. Apply. Okay, so that's the first one done. We now need to do the one for the second drive. So what did we call it? I've forgotten already. Same process again. Pool 2 this time around. We're going to go basic. Next. And this time it only gives us an option of 1 drive, which is the only drive that isn't currently allocated to a pool. Yes. Apply. And we should see our second drive pool, our second storage pool, sorry, show up. So here we have it, the 2 pools, 5.45 terabytes each. That is perfect. So next up, we actually need to make some volumes. So if we go up to volumes, and this will be very similar as the storage pools themselves, we'll make 1 for each pool. We'll call it volume 1. Volume 1 will use storage pool 1 and volume 2 will use storage pool 2. That's fine. We don't need anything more descriptive for a backup server. So it would be essentially 2 separate 6TB drives that we'll be accessing via 1 NAS. Here we go. And then volume 2 we'll be using storage pool 2. Call this volume 2. Next. And that will create. So the CPU is absolutely slammed. It is not only scanning these storage pools, but also creating volumes. So this NAS is going to be busy for quite some time. We may as well make some shares while we're here, and then everything is done with. I actually have 2 separate volumes on Skaro as well, because I have a greater than 16 terabyte capacity. And on the 32-bit NAS, 16 terabytes is the maximum amount of storage you can have in a single volume. So that is something to take into consideration. The newer 64-bit systems, and there is an updated version of Skaro, the Synology RS816, I believe. That guy has a 64-bit CPU, so you can make much bigger volumes than 16 terabytes. So it's fine for your NAS to have more storage than that, but not in a single volume. But anyway, again, something that doesn't affect us with this backup NAS. So what I'll do before creating any kind of volumes, creating any shares, sorry, is just check with Skaro and see what we want to back up and what I want to name these shares. So I'm going to quickly do that. So I've just checked on Skaro how I've got things configured. I think it's going to be actually more of a hindrance to be descriptive with these backup shares. I think it's going to be just much more straightforward if I stick with something very nondescript, which will be backup 1 and 2. So our first volume here is ready, 5.41 terabytes, that's nice. So we'll be making 1 pretty much 6 terabyte share for each volume that we've created. We're not going to enable the recycle bin on this guy. This will be a backup server, so we won't be deleting anything from it or worrying about our deleted files, so that's just an unnecessary complication. We don't need any encryption, and these are our settings. So that's the first share. I'm working this tiny little NAS really hard right now, but instead of leaving it and then coming back to this, I'll just get all of the settings done now. Off of the recording as well, I'll set up my two-factor authentication and set up another account that I'll be using on a regular basis, which is separate to the admin account. We'll leave all of our access and sharing preferences default for now. That'll be fine. Let's see if we can create the second one. Not sure if we'll be able to do that at the moment. Yes, here it is. We can create the second one. So backup 2. I think that's a good name. Backup, share 2, all very obvious, exactly the same routine, no encryption, everything's absolutely fine. It's using volume 2, which is what we want. Again, sticking with default on the permissions, and there is our second share. So backup 1, backup 2. Now the way that we've done this is essentially like plugging two individual 6 terabyte external hard drives into a computer directly. It's that simple. And if a hard drive breaks that is in storage pool 1, then share 2, backup share 2 won't be affected at all, and vice versa. So kept both drives completely separate all the way from storage pool through volume creation and into the creation of the shares themselves. So now off camera, I'm going to do some further configuration, including two-factor authentication and some other security things around the edges here that I can't show for obvious reasons. And then I'll come back and we'll see how we can proceed. So I'm going to do something really quite naughty, very, very naughty, and I've got to be extremely careful here. I wouldn't do this if this was a brand new NAS, definitely not. Although if it was brand new, I wouldn't need to do this, because this is definitely a wear and tear issue on the fan. The fan bearing is quite clearly gone. So I'm going to open it up. It's currently running, it's scanning the disks. Let me get a better screwdriver. So this is most certainly a classic IMNC do as I say, not as I do moment here, guys, because there is a risk of electric shock, of course, which is not fun. But I can't have this fan whirring away all night because it's so loud. I can hear it through the whole of the upstairs. It's going to disturb us tonight, and I want to leave this system running because it's scanning the disks, and it's not a very powerful NAS, so it's going to take absolutely forever. It's currently on about 2%. So let's jump in here, disconnect that fan. It's very, very cool in here today anyway. It's not a hot day. It's not going to overheat. They're running very slowly anyway. I have tried just tapping the fan quite firmly from the outside. It stops the noise for a minute, but it starts back up again straight away. So let's be uber careful here. Maybe we won't even be able to reach the fan connector, in which case I'm just going to have to live with this. But I want to leave this NAS powered up and scanning the disks, so we are taking a risk. Let's be very, very, very careful and have a look and see what we've got. Ah, look at this. Wonderful. So the board is all the way over there, which is great. Power supply is actually tucked underneath a nice cover, so risk of death is minimized ever so slightly by that. Let's unplug this fan, and do you know what, guys? Do you know what? I think I may have a replacement for this guy. Let's replace the fan right now. The damn thing is running, but let's go for it. So these are near silent. I do somewhere have a tiny Noctua fan for an upcoming project. It is a 40mm fan. Question is it the same size? Now this is purely a coincidence, guys. I've got this for a Dreamcast fan mod project that I'm going to do later on in the year. I've got a little 3D printed piece for the Dreamcast in there, and this is the fan I was going to use. But I can easily buy another one of these. That's not a problem. Let's just see if this Noctua is the same size. I believe it is. Got a beep from the system, probably because we've popped the top cover and unplugged a fan. Let's get this done super quick. So 3-pin header here. Let's plug this in. There we go.
There's the Noctua fan running. So that's actually working, which is great. Let's mount it then. Okay, we're just going to pop that sitting on that drive now while I unscrew the dodgy fan from the side of the NAS here. Let's get this guy out. Going to try and be as quick as possible with all this because this is beyond sketchy. That one. And that one. Okay, so there is... Oh no! Oh no, cool, it's the same size, okay. It's just thicker, so this is a 40mm fan. So we're mounting this as exhaust, so it pulls the air through the chassis this way. So there's vents on the side, pulls it through, lovely job. That one is shot, but let's mount that one. And hey, let's just do it while it's spinning, so who cares? I don't. Come on, baby. Sit there, nice and comfortably. I'll tuck the wire down in a minute. Okay, little nick on the finger from a 40mm is not as bad as a 140mm. Okay, there's one screw in. Let's get the other screw in. Beeping has stopped, which is nice. There we have it. Tiny little knock to it. It's actually, because it's different spec to these guys, it's shifting more air for the amount of power that it's being given. It's also actually louder. That's quite a loud fan in there, guys, that little Noctua, believe it or not. Not to worry, it's the only fan that I've actually got. We'll open this up again before putting it back in the rack to... Damn, do you know what we're going to do? We're going to add a low noise adapter to that guy. Because holy cow, that is loud. That is spinning like mad, that thing. Where's the low noise? So there's a bit of a closer view for you guys. I found a low noise adapter. And this could really mess with these fans. But let's see, because man, this thing is loud. Have a listen to the difference between this and when I unplug it. That's crazy, that tiny little Noctua running at full speed is so loud in here. It's just the case mainly, it's the restriction. It wasn't that loud when I was holding it, but as soon as I put it up against the side of the case with all that metal there, it just went crazy. So let's plug this in and see if everything blows up. That is so much better. So much better with a low noise adapter in there. It's now moving... Before it was moving more air than these other fans, now it's moving less. Ever so slightly less, but I can actually cope with that noise because a minute ago I could not. Okay. So that's one problem sorted. We can now hear ourselves think. It is the following day and this guy is still really working hard. It's actually the following afternoon, so this has been going for hours and hours. I'm glad I don't have any more capacity in this little server because the disk check is taking forever. You can see that we're nearly done on this guy, very nearly done, and quite nearly done on this one as well. So possibly about 15 minutes left to go on this. And then once it's checked, I can then shut it down and we can physically put it into the rack. Once it's in the rack, I can connect it to the network cabling that I have in place ready for it. I can set up the link aggregation, get all my network settings sorted, and then finally, once it's chatting on the network in the way that I want it to, I can then configure the backups. And of course, I'll show you guys the process with the backups. But for now, I just can't wait to get it in the rack. So it's still checking, and to be totally honest, folks, it's like watching paint dry. So I have to get something done while it's doing that. Otherwise, I'm just going to be here all day. So let's make some space for this guy at the front of the rack. Now then, I had a choice. Do I put it here or do I put it here? Seeing as it's a Synology system, I'm going to put it with the other Synology system. It basically makes no difference where I'm going to put it because both of these spaces are going to be occupied eventually. This guy will be powered back up eventually. It'll probably be better now to put it here, but in the long run, it'll be better to have it here, because this is my only free remaining space, and I'm going to keep the two Synologies together because it'll just look nicer. So it's going here, and I think that'll be a good place for it. One design difference that I didn't point out earlier, and I've only just noticed it now, is the newer units have handles on them, and my older one up there does not. So let's remove this blanking plate. We'll also swap the screws from silver to black to match the Synology device. So the removal of one of these lovely grey blank panels, I'll keep it just in case, because if I ever take a piece of equipment out that I no longer need and I sell that equipment or whatever, I can put the blank piece back in. I do foresee a time in the future, and not anytime soon, not this year, probably not next year, but I do foresee a time where the Mac Mini may need to either be upgraded to a newer Mac Mini or retired completely. If I can stop relying on Mac OS in my server rack, I can pretty much do everything on the Synology kit, but I just have a great deal of comfort when using Mac OS for certain tasks. But if I do get my hands on a newer Mac Mini, that'll only be a 1U space, so I'll have an additional blank probably here or here when I replace the 1U shelf with probably a 1U Mac Mini rack mount system. Now then, this is going to be interesting because I actually have a rack shelf underneath Skaro. It's meant to be holding it up, which is what I've done down here with Monster Raid. It works really well with Monster Raid, but the way things have lined up, it doesn't work so well with Skaro and isn't actually taking much of the weight. So I'm going to move that rack shelf down once we have access to the back of the rack. Then hopefully that rack shelf is going to hold up both Skaro and Trenzalore. So I'm going to close the door, and I'm going to take a little bit of a risk here, guys. I'm going to very slowly move the rack out and take off the back door just while this disk scan is finishing off, because if I don't get this done today, I'm not going to have an opportunity to do it for another couple of days. So I want to get it done because I want to get that backup transfer started, so I really need it in the rack. So it's even more exciting now we're up against the clock. Let's get this thing moved. So here we are back here. This is the shelf that I'm aiming to move. So this is going to be a bit of an ordeal because I've got stuff tied to it. But that needs to move down directly above this one. And then I should be able to squeeze in the new server from the front. I've already got the network cabling waiting for it right here. And I've also, check that out. How organised is that? I've also labelled them. And there's a spare one there for anything else I may want to add in the future. So 3 lines coming down from the patch panel there. And here is my spare IEC output on the UPS to power it. So I can get some of this organised, carefully move this shelf, trying not to unplug anything, trying not to pull that power cable out. All a little bit sketchy, but this entire video has been a bit sketchy, so let's go for it. That shelf is now moved down. It's a subtle change, but you can see that we now have presumably just about 1U gap to get that new server in underneath. Just gonna have to be careful when I push it in that I don't disconnect the power cable from Skaro, because that guy's up and running and doing stuff, so that would be completely disastrous. Next thing I need to do is triple check on my network document which ports I'm plugging into which cables. You could probably switch this off and it would just continue checking when you switch it back on, but I'd rather let it do it in one sitting. This one is done, by the way. Healthy, as you can see, just waiting on the second one now. Yes, it's done. So both displaying as healthy. The red warning there with without data protection is just the RAID type, basic. That's because we haven't chosen any particular RAID, as you know, for the reasons that we described yesterday. So let's shut down this server, and as soon as it powers down, we'll be able to unplug it and slide it into the rack. Okay, so this server has shut down. I'm going to unplug it from its temporary cabling. And let's just try and slide it in and hope that everything lines up. We shouldn't have any problems. Please just work. Yes. 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 Okay, I'm going to be careful, careful, careful. Don't want to pull out that power cable at the back of the other one. And boom. She's in. Let's bring her over a little bit so that it lines up. There we go. Look at that. I'll give you a better shot later, I promise. I know this is not a good angle. So I have all of the screws here waiting to go in. Oh, there we have it. Wow, that looks good. Okay, let's go around the back and plug it in. So that's about as good of an angle as I can get in this confined space. I'm going to plug 11 and 12 into the back of the new server. And just checking that there's no strain on that power cable. No, that's good. That is good. And this shelf is now perfectly supporting the two Synology RackStations, which is great. So, plug that in there. Plug that in there. Pull these guys back. Make it a little bit more neat. Cable management has gone down the drain a little bit with this rack, guys, but I can always tidy it up in the future if I want to. It's constantly changing anyway, so tying stuff down isn't actually that fun at the moment. Okay, let's plug the power in to this guy. Boom. There we go. Tie that up out of the way. There we have it. That is good enough for now. What I'll do is, before putting the back cover on, just check that everything works, check that I can access it, and that I've plugged everything in properly. These could do with tidying up a little bit. Let's put that there. So first power on in the rack itself. There we go. She is springing to life. Okay, and we'll close the door. So we are connected. I am back on the Trenzalore desktop. It is powered on and working well. I'm very pleased. So we can now push the rack back against the wall. So I will jump back into the screen recording in a minute to go over the backup stuff, but I just want to show you guys that now we have our aggregate for Trenzalore as well as Skaro. They're both sitting here, so 4 ports in total, and we're now operating on a bond with that static IP address, which conforms to my initial network plan. So still going very strong on the network, and everything is falling exactly into place and how I'd imagined it. So we are back on the Trenzalore desktop, and I've also got Skaro open because we're going to be working on both of them to get this backup configured. It's going to be really straightforward and simple. I'll show as much as I can without revealing too many of my files and things like that, but it's all really straightforward. I've never set up a backup between two Synology devices before, but I've had a little look at this package and I believe it will do exactly what I want it to do. So for those of you with a keen eye will notice that I'm now running dark mode. I have indeed updated my operating system. I did that yesterday evening. I'm now running Mojave, so I'm a lot more up to date here on my MacBook Pro. But let's have a quick look and see what we're going to get going here. So this is our newly configured Trenzalore server. We are here with a completely empty 2 storage pools, and we've just got 2 very basic backup shares that are each associated to 1 volume. So here they are, backup 1 and backup 2. All I have in here right now are the images that I've used for the wallpaper and the login icon. And as you can see, a little bit of customization here with the wallpaper, just matches my running theme of everything. It's really nice to get it a little bit more personalized. So firstly, on this guy, what I needed to install was a package called Hyper Backup Vault. So we're going to run Hyper Backup Vault on this machine, and we're just going to let it sit here. This is the receiving NAS. So as you can see, nothing is currently set up. Hyper Backup Vault needs to be in place on the receiving NAS so that on the NAS that's sending the data, you can run Hyper Backup, which is the main application. So let's launch Hyper Backup. And there are a lot of options in this package. We're going to be backing up to another Synology NAS. So this part confused me initially. When I read the word remote, I kind of think remote as in away from your LAN, so out there in the big wide world somewhere. And that is what this means, but you can also use this option to chat to another NAS on your LAN as well. It'll detect it straight away, at least hopefully. So there's a lot of different options with Hyper Backup here, but we're going to go for this guy because we're using another Synology device. And in the drop down here, it should automatically pick up Trenzalore because we're on the same LAN, and
Hyper Backup Vault is running on that server. Let's just give it 2 seconds. Here you go. It's picked it up right away. You can see Trenzalore with its IP address. So we'll just select that. So I've entered my username and password, and Hyper Backup on Skaro can now see the 2 shares on Trenzalore. So we'll go for backup 1. And what we'll do with this guy is we run through this wizard for every separate backup routine we want to create, I believe. So what I'm going to do for this guy is I'm going to start off with my family files. They're my most crucial files to back up. This will be the first backup task that we schedule and run. So let's go for family files. There we have it, family files. So all of that is configured appropriately, I believe. So we're going to go next. So here are all my shares on Skaro. It's asking for a source for the data backup. Now you can see my 2 separate volumes here, and even though family files is on volume 2 of Skaro, as I said, this is not going to be a one-to-one backup. We're going to use different backup routines to back up only the stuff that we need, because there'll be a lot of storage used here with files that we don't really need to back up, crucially. So we'll select family files. We won't show this again because we don't need to see that again. It's really cool. You can delve into the folders. We'll be doing that in a second. We'll delve further into a folder in order to back up only specific things from a certain folder, and we'll be doing that in IMNC files because I want to back up everything apart from my raw footage, because the raw footage is really what takes up a lot of space. I only keep it because it's very convenient to do so if I need to reuse any of it at any time, and I'm a bit of a hoarder, but there'll come a time where I probably won't be able to afford to keep all my raw footage, especially if I keep up this kind of level of production. So I will just go for family files for now. We'll focus on just that. It's now asking us if we want to back up any settings from any applications. I'm not going to do that right now because I'm just going to focus on the backup that we're actually running here for those files. And this is where we select when and how often we want this backup to run. So the first thing we're going to change is the name of the task. So we're going to call this family files backup. And there are several different options in here. One of the main things that I want to change is how frequently this runs. Now, daily is probably the best, but what I'm going to do, because I'm going to have so many tasks running, and I also have other tasks running via Carbon Copy Cloner through my Mac Mini that takes certain data from Skaro, I'm going to run this guy once a week. Because the fact of the matter is, if I put family pictures on Skaro, I don't delete them straight away from whatever device they've come from, so my phone or whatever the case may be. I also use iCloud backup for my photos. So running daily is just kind of a waste of resources, so I don't need it to do that. Once a week batch backup will be fine, and it'll give me a little bit more breathing space in the middle of the night for these different tasks to run. I don't want to cram the system full of load of tasks and then it's just trying to do all sorts of different things at the same time. So we're going to pick a different day of the week for every backup task because I don't need any of them to do it more than once a week. So we're going to do Monday at 3 in the morning. 3 in the morning is the default time, so that's perfect. We're going to leave this compressed backup data checkbox ticked for now. I don't really know the ins and outs of the compression, but it's here as an option, and if it saves us a little bit of space, that'll be good, and we will be able to still retrieve the files. Obviously, that's the whole point of a backup. So we'll leave it compressed. It'll probably take a little bit more horsepower from the CPUs in the systems, probably on the receiving NAS, I guess that's where the compression happens, but maybe on this guy, so not entirely sure, but we'll leave it checked for now. We're also going to keep this checked, and we'll keep this at default Sunday. That's absolutely fine. The integrity check, so let's just have a quick look. Yeah, that'll be fine. We don't need encryption. We'll go next on this guy. So this next step talks about backup rotation. If we enable this, you can set a maximum number of backups for this routine. And once it reaches that number, it will delete the oldest backups. We don't want that for this. It won't really be applicable anyway. And there we have it. Backup now, yes. So this will perform the first backup. If we go over to Trenzalore, we will now see, as you can see, that backup that we have just set up. So after about 20 seconds or so, the task is now running, and it's showing us running here on the receiving NAS and on the NAS that's sending it. So we are backing up family files. What I'll do is let this back up completely, see how long it takes. It's not a very big share, it's just photos with a few videos. Yes, this share is only 32 gigs in size. It's pretty much all just pictures and pictures from our phones, so not massive pictures by any means. So this is a perfect little backup to get started. So we've been up and running on Trenzalore for about 6 days now, as you guys can see, and it's been fantastic. I've just let it do its thing, and as you guys can see, we've now used some of the capacity of the server. I am about maybe 40% there with my backup routines. I've got a lot of sorting of data to do on Skaro before I complete all of the backup routines, so I'm not going to show you all of my routines in this video, but I will go over a couple of things in this clip. So if we just head on over to Skaro for a second. One of the main reasons why I've left all of the backups running in the nighttime is because Skaro does various other tasks, and this is a great example. You guys can see that Time Machine is currently connected under connected users, and my MacBook Pro is actually backing up to Skaro via Time Machine. So this server runs Time Machine for 3 Macs in my home. It also runs a Plex server. I also export all of my YouTube videos directly to it. I upload all of my YouTube videos directly from it. Plus, I have all of my data stored now on Skaro. I don't have local data stored on my machines. So all of my little documents that I access, it's all pretty much via the server. I've just got very few things stored locally anymore. So for those reasons, there's kind of a lot of activity in and out of Skaro during the day. So by keeping all of the backups to Trenzalore active in the nighttime, I don't notice any potential slowdown that may occur. Anyway, let's take a little look at the backups that I've been running. So if we open Hyper Backup, we'll have a look at the routines that I've set up. So I set up the family files backup routine in the previous clip that you guys just watched. So that's a very small little backup, and it's the most crucial backup because they're obviously priceless photos that we can't lose. So I've got those backed up in multiple locations and on iCloud, as I've mentioned to you guys. So I feel very secure with that particular backup now. Sorry if you guys can hear any additional noise in the background. My fans have just kicked in the server rack here. It's quite a warm day today, so I do apologise, but this is going to be a relatively short clip anyway. Another backup that I've created is my media backup. This backs up pretty much all of my music files. I still own quite a chunky iTunes library. I also have a collection of a few standard definition TV shows. Not that many, but that's what this backup holds. I set this up in exactly the same way as I set up the backup that I demonstrated to you guys for family files. This one is a little bit different, IMNC files. The only way it's different, if we jump into edit here, instead of selecting the entire folder, I've selected parts of that folder. So the IMNC file share contains a lot of data, and the biggest, most chunky file is definitely the scratch folder, this guy here. This is where all of the raw footage resides. So month by month, I keep a month's worth of library on my editing drive, on my scratch disk that's locally connected to my machine. And then once that month is over, and once I've finished all of the projects on that drive, I offload the entire library. I do monthly libraries and I offload them onto the server. So this is all of the raw Final Cut projects and footage and everything like that. So a lot of space. You guys can see I've also deselected some other things in here, especially this folder sort. I do still have a lot of sorting to do. This IMNC folder isn't so bad, but I'm backing up my exports, which is the main thing. Exports completed. They are kind of the crucial files there. So they're the 3 shares that I've got at the moment. A share that I haven't set up, a backup that I haven't set up yet, sorry, is a backup for Chamber. So I'll blur out all of my files here because it's all pretty much my personal documents here. Chamber is anything that can't go into any of these other shares. So absolutely everything sits in Chamber, and the reason that I haven't created a backup for that yet is simply because it needs a lot of organization. So I've been doing it bit by bit, and once I've completed that in a few weeks time, I will then be able to create a backup share for it. So one thing I wanted to show you guys and demonstrate to you guys, if we go to a share that's slightly less obvious here, there we go. So just my iTunes here, my media. If we have a look at the size of this share, so the raw capacity of this entire share is 579 gigabytes, and with compression enabled, the backup, bearing in mind this is backing up the entire share, so the exact same amount of files, give or take, this is only 438 gigs. So that is quite a considerable saving. Let's have a little look at some data for another share. We won't be able to do IMNC files because I've only selected certain folders. That's much harder to determine. You guys can see that backup drive 2 is the drive that I've dedicated to the IMNC stuff, and I'll pretty much have this for all of the video stuff, and I'll have this for all of the other stuff, because the video stuff by far takes up the most space. But let's take a look at how effective the compression was for family files. We'll open up the properties on both servers here. So 32 gigs on Skaro, 25 gig on Trenzalore. So it's a good amount of compression you get there. If you compress everything that you back up, you'll save quite a lot of space. And I've worked it out and I've looked at my data a lot more closely. Because I'm not going to be backing up that raw video data, Trenzalore is actually big enough to back up everything of mine completely with some headroom. So that excites me very much. Apart from that raw footage, I'll get everything on here as a backup, so that's fantastic. I didn't expect to be able to do that when I first set this up. So one thing that I neglected to mention previously in the video is specifically about Hyper Backup. How does it work and how does it operate? So Hyper Backup uses a block level incremental backups. So you can think of it a little bit like Time Machine. Once you do your initial backup and it gets your big chunky, say this big 1.2 terabyte share backed up, it will only then back up anything that's changed. So if I've added a 2 gigabyte file to that folder on Skaro, come that night when that backup is due to run, it'll only back up that 2 gigabyte file. But a little bit cooler than that, if you change a document, so if I've got a Word document stored on this server and I open it up and I change some of the text and I resave that document, it gets resaved on Skaro, when Hyper Backup then runs that routine in the nighttime, it will back up that changed document. So the backup will stay constantly synced. Now it's not just a big chunky folder full of backups. If we actually open a backup here, I think we'll go for let's just go for family files because that'll be absolutely fine. If we just take a look at one, you guys can see that similarly to the Time Machine interface, although very different interface design, it operates in a very similar way once it loads here. We're not going to get a great deal of data showing here because we haven't been backing up for that long, but you can see we have a timeline. So you have a timeline of all of your changes. So every time a file is changed, you'll be able to jump back to that moment in time and restore any file that you need to restore, which is fantastic and something that is extremely valuable with Time Machine. So you're getting that very advanced level of backup functionality with all of your files on your server, and it's not just a disk clone. So I do apologize for the fan noise that you can hear in the background, folks, once again, but I've got the third drive in here, the one that was making a strange sound when I tried it in the NAS, and I fired it up in this dock a couple of times, and if you just take a listen, hopefully you'll be able to distinguish between the noises that the drive is making and the general fan noise in the room. Get a bit closer. So there is something amiss with the drive spinning itself. Doesn't feel like it's actually getting up to a full spin. It feels like there's some restriction on the platter spinning there. And you can hear it squeaking ever so slightly, and the vibration is not there. It doesn't feel like the platter's up to speed. So it's struggling. And the machine, this dock is currently connected to my Mac Mini. The Mac Mini can see that there's a drive in the dock, but the drive doesn't show up on the machine, so you can't erase it. You can't actually access the drive itself to have a look at it. You can't do it. You can't communicate with the drive at all. I can communicate with the dock, so the dock is saying, yes, I've got a drive docked, but I can't communicate with the drive. So there is something amiss here with this purple drive. They're used drives, so I mean 2 out of 3, absolute score. But this one will need a little bit of looking at, and by the
scary sounds that it's making, I'm not sure that I will be able to get it up and running. So let's come down and have one last look at this before we close out the video. Here is Skaro, my Synology RS816 main server, lovely beastly bit of kit. And this one is my backup server, Trenzalore Synology RS214. So they are working brilliantly together. Different generations, different configurations, but absolutely fantastic. DSM makes it very easy for you to get backups up and running between two Synology NASs, and more importantly, Hyper Backup as an application. There are other applications available to do it, other packages available, but Hyper Backup seems to be the most popular and the most feature-packed. It's certainly working really well for me, even though I haven't been using it for very long, only 6 days. I know it's just going to sit there and do everything I need it to do. So far, it's had every single option I've needed in it, and so many more, I guess. So that's perfect. Down here, we've got my Mac Mini, and you guys may be wondering, well, Tom, you've now got these lovely servers up and running. You're going to get Monster Raid up and running in the future again, and yes, we will make a video about that. What's with this guy? What's with this lonely, ancient 3 terabyte external hard drive sitting here? Well, I'll tell you something a little bit interesting, and this is how we'll close out the video. This guy has, now that you've seen a few of my shares and you know roughly the structure of my data, this guy backs up family files. So the family file share on Skaro, I have a carbon copy cloner routine. So nightly, every single night at 1 in the morning, family files gets backed up to this guy. And also one folder from IMNC files, and that is the completed exports. So completed exports and family files end up on here every night, any little change. Now, why is that important? I'm backing all that stuff up to here. Well, you've got to kind of consider everything. Yes, this is fantastic, and this guy saves me from a drive failure in here, a complete system failure on Skaro. I can get all of my data back from the RS214. That's brilliant. But what about if I have to leave my home quickly? What about if I have to run away from my home for some crazy reason? The house is just about to blow up. You know, they're very, very unlikely situations. But let's just say, for argument's sake, whatever example you can think of, I have to get out of my home and I have to get out quickly, and we've got to run as a family. We've got to get somewhere fast. I can take this, I can put my hand on it within about 5 seconds, pull on it, the cabling will fall out the back, I can shove this in my bag, and I'm taking my most crucial files with me, and they are my family pictures and my YouTube videos. Yeah, I lose a lot of other data, but I've got this guy, a simple external hard drive, no special RAID, no special formatting, no encryption, no compression, just straight up files stored right on the drive. And that is why I'm sticking with that guy there for now, because it gives me that extra layer of comfort. Call me crazy, but the more data you add, the more important your data becomes and the harder it becomes to manage. So anything you can do to help is helpful, I guess. As redundant as that sentence is, anything you can do to help helps. So don't forget as well, over here, I have these guys, which in an event of a catastrophic emergency, I would grab. These are each 2 terabytes, and they all have an archive in time. So one of them is like 2009, 2010 era, another one is like 11 and 12, 13 and 14, and then just randomness from then on. All of my old videos, all of my old raw footage, everything on those 8 terabytes of drives there. Now you may be wondering about off-site backup. So, off-site is going to be a bit of a challenge for me. As you guys know, I've recently retired 2 other Western Digital external hard drives from this rack. They are a 2 terabyte and a 750 gig that I've owned for years. They are now sitting around doing nothing. So my kind of for now plan with the offsite is load up those 2 drives with my most important data, physically carry them to my parents' house and leave them there. That's as far as my plan has got at the moment. So that's, other than my iCloud backups and the files that I have in Dropbox, that'll be the only data storage that I have that isn't under this roof. Now, I would love to get a cheap desktop 2-bay Synology NAS, put 2 fairly beefy drives in it, and have a multi-terabyte NAS sitting at my parents' house, talking to Skaro via Hyper Backup in a similar way that we've set up RS214. But my parents, even though fibre is available in their area, they haven't decided to upgrade their connection. and they don't really need to upgrade their connection. Standard broadband ADSL, completely fast enough for what they want to do, and they have no slowdown issues because they only do one thing at a time on the connection. If I was to put a NAS up there, and if I was to say put a 20 or 30 gigabyte file on my NAS here today, and then come that night it was to back up at my parents' house, even if I set it to like midnight or 1 in the morning for a backup, that file won't be done downloading by the time the morning comes around. It's a very slow connection. It's just, and it'll use the entire bandwidth of the connection as well. So it's not really feasible for me to do like an active online backup at my parents' house at the moment. But when it does become feasible in the future, I will do that. Unfortunately, I don't really feel like I'm in the position to put a NAS in any of my friends' homes. I can't really think of anybody off the top of my head locally that I would be able to do that with, if I'm totally honest. Data is so important, and you need to know, it's not just about trusting your friends, it's about trusting everybody that will be entering that property. If you're going to set up a NAS somewhere, it's going to be out in the open, presumably, you know, it needs airflow. It's going to be sitting on a cabinet or behind a cabinet somewhere. You'll be able to get to it. It's not going to be locked away in a drawer or locked away in a filing cabinet like you can do with storing hard drives somewhere, because it needs to be plugged in. It needs airflow, you know. And yeah, you can do as much as you like with it. You can put passwords on it and you can make it as secure as you like, but I'd still always have it in the back of my mind that a lot of my most crucial data and a lot of quite personal data was in a different location that I didn't have complete control over. So at the moment I don't feel ready to put a NAS anywhere else, and I'm unable to do it at my parents' house at the moment, but we will talk about off-site backups again in the future, because other than off-site, I am now chuffed to bits with my backup solutions, and we've come a long way in 3 years. 3 years ago, all of you guys used to cringe, including myself actually. Well, most definitely myself more than anyone. I used to cringe, and more importantly than cringing, I used to worry. I used to genuinely worry around my backups. You know, it would keep me up at night. If I thought about it, if it popped into my head, I was like, damn, what if I lose these files, you know? But that's not a concern anymore. We've got a very robust system here. So anyway, rambling aside, huge thank you to William. William, without you, I couldn't have done this. I couldn't have just gone out and bought 2 6 terabyte drives. So you've made this possible. I was able to buy the NAS, but I've got to save and save and save for these projects. So what you've done, you've just fast-tracked this entire thing. It could have been months down the line, or maybe even a year down the line, that I would have been able to do this. So William, thank you so much for the drives. It means the world. And the support that I'm getting from every single one of you guys at the moment is sensational. So thank you for everything you're all doing for me. The views, the thumbs up, and the watching of the videos. It's just all magnificent. So anyway, I just want to let you guys know that I truly appreciate it. I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you all in the next video.